Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. It's been 2 weeks since the last episode. Good to be back. Today's topic is being internally directed versus being externally directed. So I'll explain in a few minutes why that terminology, but I'll start out by just telling you how I've come to be thinking about this issue lately. And this is an issue that I'm actively finding challenging but rewarding to attempt. And I'm definitely interested in any ideas that listeners have about this issue. So, as a general phenomenon, one of the most rewarding practices I've found over the years is going on what you might call a distraction diet. And so this is when, let's just say I take a Saturday and I don't have my phone with me and no email, no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter, no kind of random checking of news. In my case, no jiu-jitsu websites. And when I do this, and I think this is pretty common, it's just amazing how after some number of hours, life seems to get a lot simpler. And I'll start to ask more basic questions like, hey, what really matters to me? What am I after? What among the things I'm doing do I really want to be doing? What don't I want to be doing? And it's just, there's something magical about not having all of these distractions. And yet it's very easy in most of our lives to get this overwhelming amount of distractions, and they can creep up in certain ways. So a couple weeks ago, I was feeling like I had way too many distractions. I actually often will call them interruptions, and I'll probably call them that most of the time because it's, interruption from the perspective of, my primary purposes for the day. And so I felt like there were too many interruptions. And in particular, one of the things I noticed was I had a video that came out, which you can find on YouTube, called "What's the Deal with the Green New Deal?" Although I'm quite sure that YouTube is suppressing it right now. So if you look up "What's the Deal with the Green New Deal?" Alex Epstein, even though it has well over 1 million views, it's hard to get it to come up. But maybe if you search with those terms in particular, it will come up. And anyway, the when that came out at first, it was getting a lot of views, and one thing I was noticing is I was just tracking the views. And this is just something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do very frequently because, well, why do that? Is that really that important? And I wasn't doing that much to control that. It was outside of my control for the most part. So it was just something where it ended up I was self-interrupting. And so I was just noticing that. I was just noticing, gosh, I'm getting, and I'm feeling, as part of this, I'm feeling reactive, and I don't like this. So I thought, okay, well, I really want to kind of get to the bottom of why is it so hard to avoid interruptions, and then what forms of interruption are the most devastating to me. So I went on a pretty strong distraction diet, and it was basically no looking at anything except, so the basic things were, I have my planning tool, which I use in a program called CheckVist, which is just a kind of outlining software, which is good for just making different kinds of lists. So I have that. I have my calendar, and then I have the actual execution of things I'm doing. So in CheckVist and in the calendar, I decide what to do, and then doing whatever is necessary to do it. And it could be that some of these things are entertainment. So it could be, okay, I go on a walk with the dog or even watch something on Netflix, but it was planning it specifically. And what I wasn't doing, what I was specifically avoiding, was doing kind of distractions in transition. So when I was, let's say I'd be done with something, there might be a temptation, I might go to this jiu-jitsu website, or I might look at Facebook, and I decided, okay, none of that. And so what I was trying to get at is, okay, I'm just doing my planning, and I'm just doing my execution, and life is going to be that simple. And from that perspective, I'll be able to see what kinds of distractions or interruptions do I find most problematic, and why. So one thing I noticed is that for me, at least, the kinds of things that I find particularly toxic in terms of getting more done and just feeling overwhelmed is any time that I am in any way waiting on another person or I'm checking on another person's actions. So, for example, with let's with tracking a video, that was an example where I'm like I'm kind of waiting on, hey, how many people are going to watch this video? And I definitely noticed this with things like sales activities. Hey, did this engagement go through? Did this speech go through? What's happening with this deal? Now, those are things that are good to track on some interval. They're crucial to track on some interval. Otherwise, if I'm not measuring them, then I'm not going to take control of the results. But it's not a good idea to track them any more than they really need to be tracked to guide my planning and execution. And that's the key. So it's good to plan on when to look at those. So when I would look at, say, my sales related email, like every 2 days, I found that I was able to concentrate much more on everything else. And then my sales related activity was much more constructive because instead of just checking on other people's actions, which I didn't really have any direct control over, I would think proactively, okay, what can we do to improve the business going forward? And I got some really good work done and it was much more enjoyable. So I noticed that in particular. So for me, that's email, to some extent, Slack. Those are the biggest things that I find just they end up being self-interruption. But then also certainly different kinds of social media, those have they're not as strong for me, but they definitely do have the quality of adding a whole bunch of inputs to my thinking, which is, I think, kind of very, very covertly destructive in a way that's not obvious. And to get at this, I'll talk about one thing that I noticed when I was on the really hardcore distraction diet, which was how little overwhelm there was. So overwhelmed, feeling like, oh, there's more to do than I can do. I noticed that when I just had my planner and then my calendar and then my actions, if I ever felt like there's too much to do, well, it's pretty simple. I look at the planner, I look at the calendar, and I have to decide, okay, where in time are these things going or not going? What am I going to do or not do? So if I have client work or I have working on the book or I have giving a speech or doing a podcast, there's only so many hours a day, and then I can plan out how long they're going to take. And what I'd find is I would just make some pretty good prioritization decisions, and there's not that much to do. And in any case, everything that's really important, I'll find time to do. And then otherwise I won't do it, or I'll do it later. But I just found that when I'm on the distraction diet, overwhelm quickly disappears. But as soon as I have all the distractions, overwhelm is much easier to happen. And I was thinking about it, like, why is this so striking? And I think it's useful to think of these different distractions as other people giving me direction. So when I'm looking at my email, it's basically, hey, here's other people's agenda. Here's what other people want me to respond to. And then if I look at an email, even if I just scan it but don't do anything about it, that's kind of the worst. So then I end up seeing, oh, here's what 25 different people want me to do. And then that enters my internal planning of what to do. And it's just sort of this chaos that's been thrown in there that I don't make any clear decision about. And then on top of that, if I'm doing that, it's often distracting me from actually doing the real planning and distracting me from actually doing the execution. So instead of having this kind of simple, up-to-date plan and then executing when I've planned to do so, it's the plan is completely unclear and there's an overwhelming amount of stuff that I could potentially do. And then so that then feels overwhelming. And then this whole thing makes it very hard to concentrate on anything. And so then my ability to execute is much lower. And it's just it's just a mess. It's amazing just by adding all of these different directions from other people, how much that complicates life and renders me really productively handicapped. Whereas when I was on the distraction diet, it was pretty amazing how much I could get done because I just work on something and that was the only thing to do. And then in transition, there was nothing else to do. So in transition, I could decide, okay, I'm going to go relax, like take a walk, or I'm going to do the next thing. And then I could do the next thing. So I was just looking back on that diet. I'll tell you in a minute what makes it hard to stay on it, or at least for me, what's made it hard to stay on it. But when I was on that diet, I just looked back and I thought, oh, we had this consulting case and I was able to do super, super innovative work on that very efficiently because that was all I was focused on and I wasn't worried about anything else. And I knew I was on top of everything. And it was so nice and so enjoyable. And when I was on the distraction diet, and I've had this in general, I feel like how could I ever go off this diet? This diet is the greatest. I love this feeling and I've determined at least tentatively the reason that I love it is because I'm being, and this goes to the topic today, I'm being internally directed versus externally directed. So when I'm talking about internally directed, it's that I myself am really directing my thinking and action. And I don't just mean in a broad way, like, hey, I decide what career I want. I mean, on that level, but really on a day-to-day level, what is my mind and body doing and who's deciding that? And the idea is I'm deciding versus when I have these distractions, other people are deciding. And they're at least planting all these distracting ideas in my head that are preventing me from thinking and executing very, very effectively and as simply as is possible. And I like thinking of it as internally directed versus externally directed because at least I rebel against the idea of being externally directed. So I like having the association of other people telling me what to do with all of these distractions or interruptions that may otherwise seem tempting. So when I was in the distraction diet, I thought, okay, I'm never getting off this. And then I thought, like, this has happened many times and I have fewer distractions than most, but still the amount of distractions I have is definitely has a big undermining effect on how much I can do and often how much I enjoy it. So I wanted to notice, okay, what can pull me off this? And one thing that can pull one off a distraction diet is just if there is a necessity of checking other people's behavior with some sort of frequency, that can do it. So for example, if let's say I have a media thing that I need to do, like an interview with the media that I need to do, and that requires getting some external feedback and having a bunch of back and forth decisions that I need to do. That can get me sucked into, I got to check email to see if that happened. And then I'm back in this world. And before I know it, I'm just checking email for that and for other things. And I kind of forget about my internal direction. Or in my case, sometimes just with the way the business is going, sometimes there will be a deal that needs to close or there's some progress or something is needed from me. And then, I feel like at least I need to check that. And then it's just a few of those times of like waiting on other people's decisions, checking other people's behavior. And then I lose that internal direction, that simplicity. And often it's bundled together with other things. So one challenge I'm thinking about, and I'm definitely interested in other people's answers is how to stay on a distraction diet as much as possible. And so one idea that I'll work on is just I have an assistant, and so using my assistant even better in terms of how we process different kinds of things like this. And if I do need to interact externally, how do we do that? And it may be that we have it so that I'm not in if there's something with email, like I process email every 2 days, but if there's something urgent, he'll just, he'll tell me during a certain time of day, or he'll come to me in person and like interrupt me with it and have me like look at something on the computer, but not go into the whole email, which then becomes a whole distracting thing. Another thing is just with the phone, There are a couple of features of my phone that I like to have all the time. Particularly, I like the application Otter so that I can talk. I can talk to myself and get it transcribed. But just having that phone is the iPhone with all of its capabilities is just so easy to go into that distracted mode. And so one thing is I have a little iPod and it just has about 8 apps on it, and all of them are useful kind of productivity apps. And that I find very useful. And so I'll talk to my assistant about that should be my default thing. And then part of it is not really connected to text messages. And then maybe I'll just have him have my phone in case anything is there, because text messages can be very distracting. It's at least for me, it's amazing how sensitive this internal direction can be, like how easily it can be disrupted, and then how easy it is to get off of it. And it's reminiscent of other kinds of diets, I think, where somebody they're eating well, they feel really good, and then they eat like a couple of sugary snacks, and then suddenly they're in this mode of, oh, the whole world is having sugary snacks. Not as in the whole world is having them, but like my whole world is me having more sugary snacks. So I'm really interested in how to maintain a distraction diet even better, because I just think there's all of this incredible potential that comes from when we're being internally directed. And it's really just thinking about what we're going to do and then doing it. And part of that is going to be learning about other people's input, learning about results, but that really should be planned. It shouldn't be directing us all the time, at least not with a lot of careers that we have, certainly not with mine, because my main thing that I need to do is do new creative work. So that is not helped by finding moment to moment what other people's agendas are. So being internally directed is this sublime thing. I would like to do more of it, and I'm definitely interested in other people's ideas. And in future weeks, I will keep you posted. But at least I found this a helpful distinction that makes me more and more motivated to have what I've been calling the distraction diet. Okay, that is it for today. If you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, you can email me at alex@alexepstein.com. No promise to respond, but I do read the emails. You can join the discussion on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. And to get the emails reminding you of the now mostly bi-weekly episodes, go to humanflourishingproject.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.